Welcome to this video on Cisco ACI network automation. We will have a look at different possibilities of automating Cisco application-centric infrastructure. We will create tenants, we will create network objects in multiple ways. We will choose tenants as the objects we will create, just as an example. Here we will create one of these objects using the GUI. We will call it Hello World GUI, very original. So we will create this object and then we will see how it pops up in the GUI. Now we have a new tenant. If you noticed, I opened before another window that happens to be an API inspector. This window shows us whatever calls the GUI made into the API. Here you can see the post call, including URL and payload and JSON payload that the GUI sent into the API in order to create that tenant. Now we can take this payload, put it into any REST client of our choice. In this case, I'm using PO, and use this code to create a tenant. Here you can see we change it a bit in order to create a different one, Hello World REST. You have to send another request in front of this with authentication, and once do that, you will have a new tenant in ACI. Let's go to the GUI again, and here you go, Hello World REST is there. You could obviously use these REST API calls inside of programming languages. And actually, one very nice feature of PO is that it can translate these REST calls into, for example, Python. You can see the Python code on the screen that would generate that very same result. You can translate it in other programming languages like JavaScript or curl calls, or even any other programming languages that PO supports. You can go to the web page to see that. However, there are more simple ways to achieve this using programming languages. Let's have a look at Python. Instead of using this code, generating the REST payload, sending the REST call, we can use native Python libraries. This is what we call Python, the Python SDK or ACI toolkit, and here you can see an example Python script that creates a tenant. Extremely simple, no REST code, no XML, no JSON, just Python. Let's run it and see what happens. So there we go, Python ACI create tenants, and that was it. Let's go to the GUI, and here it is, Hello World Python SDK. Again, you can build on this using the Python SDK in order to provide connectivity for other automation frameworks. Let's use Ansible here as an example. I created an Ansible playbook that will do exactly the same. It will create a tenant called Hello World Ansible. URL, username and password are already stored in a credentials file. Let's execute this playbook. There you go. That's it. One object was changed. The change was okay, and here you can see the Hello World Ansible tenant created. So let's change gears a bit and let's have a look at some graphical orchestration tools. First, let's consider Openstack. The Openstack name for a new tenant is project. Let's create a project in Openstack and then let's have it reflected into ACI. So through the Neutron plugin for ACI in Openstack, Openstack will automatically create any network construct that is built in Openstack over in ACI as well. In the case of tenants, tenants will be mirrored only when there's any object inside to be mirrored as well. So in order to get the project or the tenant created in ACI, we need to have something inside. Let's create a network, very simple one, just to have something inside of this project. Once we have that, the project will be created in ACI in the form of a tenant. So let's define a very simple network without any subnet, very easy, create, there you go. At this point, we can go back to ACI and see that the new tenant is there, prefixed by the underscore Openstack underscore string that the Neutron ML2 plugin introduces there. The last example we are going to look into is UCS Director. UCS Director is the Cisco orchestration tool with lots of predefined workflows and tasks for ACI and other storage, compute, and virtualization platforms. Here we will create a new workflow. I would like to show you how easy this is. So first of all, in the new workflow, we have to define any input variables and output variables. As only input variable, we will take the tenant name, the name of the new tenant that we will create. We will define these variables as text, string, and then we can go forward. We will have no user output, so we can click here on submit, and we have our workflow created. Now we have to define what this workflow is going to do. So by double clicking on the workflow name, we will access to the canvas where you can define with drag and drop fashion which tasks are going to be executed. And here is the true power of UCS Director. There are lots of predefined tasks that can be used for these workflows. For example, here we found the create epic tenant. You have to provide a bit of information. You see mandatory and optional attributes. Mandatory is, of course, the tenant name and the credentials. We have stored in UCS Director already credentials for this ACI cluster, so we will choose those ones. After hitting next and submit, our workflow is ready to be run, so you can click on execute now. We will provide a tenant name. You can imagine what it's going to be like. Hello World UCS Director. Submit, and there you go. Now you can see the workflow process here. In this case, it's only one single task that will create the tenant. After refreshing a couple of times, it should go green. There you go, completed. Now we can go back to ACI and we will see that the new tenant has been created. Again, this tenant creation is just an example of any activity in the network that could be automated over the REST API, over Python, SDKs, Ansible, Openstack, etc. etc. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.